Hello! Today I am coming at you with an updated Sydney Grace brand overview and a very special giveaway. Last month, Sydney Grace released a collaboration palette with Kendra Matthews, and this is the Unveiled Wedding palette. So Sydney Grace was super kind and sent this palette to me as PR and also offered to send me another palette so that way I could do a giveaway for one of you all. I'm super excited about this opportunity. Last year, I reached out to a few different brands and asked if they would be interested in having any type of business relationship. Shout out to Sydney Grace for being the only one to respond and say yes. So I am really appreciative. I've been a longtime customer. I think I purchased from Sydney Grace for the first time in either the Christmas and July sale in 2020 or 2021. So it's been a little bit of time that I've been using and loving their eyeshadows. And so I'm really excited to be highlighting this palette for you all and giving the opportunity for one of you all to have this as well. So for the giveaway, stay tuned for the end of the video for instructions on how to enter. But I figured I would go ahead and take this opportunity to show off the palette. But since it's been a little while since it's released, I also wanted to just show you all of the rest of the Sydney Grace products I have at this point and kind of just do an updated brand collection overview. So if you want to learn more about all of the different products I've tried from Sydney Grace and see some swatches, then go ahead and just keep on watching and subscribe. I figured we could go ahead and just start off by swatching out this new palette that they're coming out with. And I can tell you, I've been wearing this for a couple of weeks, so I've gotten to know the palette pretty well. And I will, of course, be honest with you about what I like and don't like about the palette. First thing I'll say is that the mattes are the same formula as Sydney Grace mattes. So if you have used them at all before, they're that same formula. Although I will say I find that some of them are a little bit harder pressed than some of the mattes that I've gotten in the past. But I'm honestly not upset about that because I have had a problem with some of my Sydney Grace mattes being fragile in the past. So I'm okay that they're a little bit harder pressed overall. With that said, I do really like the layout of this palette and how it's kind of done by row. That's how I do a lot of my build your own palettes, and I find that a really intuitive way to work with shadows. When it comes to the shimmer formula, we've got two different formulas going on. We have this formula in this one shade, High Bride, that is much more textured and sparkly than their normal kind of shimmer formula. And this reminds me, if you've tried their multi-chromes, it has a very similar texture to their multi-chromes. Compared to that, the regular shimmer formula is a very standard kind of mainstream shimmer formula. It's not like that super sparkly kind of formula that you see in other indie brands, but it is very, very consistent and nice to work with. I've been using this shade a lot as an inner corner shade, but I also have been using it to top over some of the other shimmers to add a little bit more sparkle. One critique I have of the palette is that I think that these two shades in particular are pretty similar, and I don't know if I would have picked both of them to be in this palette together. But with that said, obviously I did not make this palette, and Kendra is an actual bridal makeup artist, so I trust her judgment in knowing what people want, but that is a small critique I have about the palette overall. The only other critique that I have is that I wish that there were a little bit of some mid-range kind of shimmers within this palette. We've got only 4 shimmers, that really sparkly one, and then these 3, and really this is the only kind of lid shimmer shade that I think of when I think of what I would put on my lids, and these are some I might use more in the outer corner transitioning to mattes. But again, that's just a personal preference. Like all of the other Sydney Grace palettes, these shadows are magnetic and removable, which is something that I really appreciate about the brand. And they also have a light and deep version, which they do for all of their palettes. And again, that's something I really, really appreciate about the brand, and the fact that they have always been inclusive with their palette offerings. Like I said, overall, I've really enjoyed the palette, and I'm really appreciative of Sydney Grace's willingness to send this my way. I think it is so sweet that they're willing to work with someone as small as me and my channel, so I really appreciate it. In between me reaching out to them and them sending this to me, they did send me a small PR package to, like, you know, just in between. So I will go ahead, and as I'm swatching through my eyeshadows, I'll be sure to point out like what was given to me versus what I've paid for. The majority of what I have paid for, but I'll be sure to point out those differences. And I do want to note, I'm not going to be affiliated with Sydney Grace in the long term. This is just like a one-time PR package that they sent me. So I'm not like long-term affiliated with the brand. It's not skewing my opinion and like trying to push product out or anything like that. But I am really, really appreciative, and getting PR has been like a bucket list thing for my channel, and so getting to get my first PR has been very, very exciting. We'll go ahead and save swatching the single shadows for last, but I'll go ahead and highlight the other products I have from Sydney Grace first. So I have their 9-pan magnetic palette. You can see this one doesn't have the wells. Their magnetic palettes are actually a really fair price point, and I really enjoy them. They're very good quality. They all have a mirror in them. And this one is I think it's 48 shadows that this holds, but this is like the largest size that they offer. And again, super happy with the quality of both of these. Last year in the Christmas and July sale, they also released cream highlighters and cream blushes, which I was very excited about. So the cream highlighter shade that I have is On a Cloud. It's a very like easy, kind of mushy kind of cream. It's not like if I push down into it, I can't like completely push it down with my finger, but you can see it picks up very, very easily. And here it is swatched out. I kind of just got like a huge swatch of it, so I'll try to kind of shear it out a little bit more. This one, it does have like a discernible sparkle in it. So if you don't like a sparkly highlighter, I don't know how much you would like this, but I do enjoy it. I don't use it nearly as much as the blush, though, I will say, as seen by the lids. This is the shade Ballerina. I think this might be like the lightest one that they have, and I really like this. It's like a very kind of true pink in my opinion, and for me and like my super fair skin, it's super easy to wear. And the texture on the blush is very similar to the highlighter. The blush, it does dry down, but I don't find that this has like the longest wear time. I would say it's probably similar wear time to something like my Tower 28 blushes. And then lastly, I've got one of their cream shadows. This is the shade Cookie Bake Off, and this was sent to me as a part of that PR package that they sent. Oh my gosh, I just squirted out a ton. I used to have another one of these. I had the shade, I think it was called Eureka or Euphoria. I really do like the cream shadow formula. It's really, really nice. Very, very high pigment and nice and shiny. It lasts very well too. The only critique I have about these, and I said this in my last Sydney Grace video however long ago, I really wish that these came in a pot instead of a squeezy tube. Just like my own personal preference, I find it easier to control when I'm dipping into a pot versus trying to like squeeze out the correct amount of this tube, because with these, a little goes a very long way. These are the two 9-pan palettes I have. I have the Mountain Trail palette, and here is the artwork for that one. It's really, really pretty, like a kind of like, you know, earthy green, yellow toned palette. And then I've got Where the Wild Things Grow And here's the cover of this one. This one has been discontinued. I got it during the last Christmas in July sale, and that's when they were discontinuing it. I got it for a great deal. If you aren't familiar, the Christmas in July sale is exactly what it sounds like. It's in July, and for a week within the month, they do a different sale each day, and there are some really, really good deals. So if you're planning on shopping from Sydney Grace, if you can hold out, I recommend shopping from the Christmas in July sale. That's when I have bought the majority of the products that I own from Sydney Grace. I'm going to go ahead to wait and swatch these until I swatch all of my eyeshadows, so that way you can see them in comparison to everything else I have, and I'll be sure to note which shades are from which palette when I'm swatching them all out. I'm going to go ahead and wait to do comparisons until we get to swatching my whole collection. I'll pull all of the shades out of here and put them in with all of my others, so that way you can see what they look like against some of the closest shades. And if you have any comparisons like that I don't do on the same arm with the same swatches, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram, and I'd be happy to compare anything that you weren't able to see together within this video. First up, we've got a multi-chrome. This is the shade Birthday Girl. This one has got kind of a silvery base with a blue to purple to pink to gold shift on top. And I'm trying my best to capture the shifts. I don't know if I'll be able to get the most extreme shifts, but I'll also be sure to show you them out of the light so you can see that base color. Next up, we have Lavender Hill. This is a cool metallic purple. This is, and most of the shimmers that I have are going to be in that $6.50 type of formula, not the $5.50 formula. This next shade is Sugar Sugar, and this is one I got in that small PR package that they sent to me while I was waiting on the palette to be announced. And this one is interesting. I thought it was going to be a matte based on the pictures, but it actually is more of like a satin kind of shade. And this is in that more satiny finish compared to like the more metallic finish you can see in Lavender Hill. And I'm not sure if you can pick it up, but the multi-chrome texture is always a little bit like thicker, glossier, chunkier almost. And these are really the only 3 types of shimmer-esque formulas that Sydney Grace has. And I should also note, so we've got the price of the standard kind of metallic shades as $6.50, the more satiny shades as $5.50, and then the multi-chromes are $15. There are a couple that were $9, but I think those got discontinued. I'll point those out as we keep swatching. Next, we have Dear Reader. This was a shade in collaboration with Temptalia, so I'm not sure if it's still available. This one is the warmer tone purple version of Lavender Hill, but they're very similar. Next, we have the Mielke Way. This is another shade that was done in collaboration with Temptalia. This one has kind of a burgundy pink almost base to it with a greenish gold shifting shimmer on top. Elegant Candy is depotted from the Where the Wild Things Grow palette, and this is again one of those more kind of satiny shades. This next one is called Flowering Fields, and this is kind of like the metallic version of that Elegant Candy shade. This one's maybe a little bit plummier with like a more red undertone to it, but you can see they're kind of similar. This one I got as a free gift with purchase, and I will say something I really like about Sydney Grace is in recent years, they've been sending like a free shadow with most of my orders, it seems like. So I like that they're doing those little freebies with purchases. This next one is a black-based multi-chrome. This one was sent to me in PR, and this is the shade Twisted Shifter. This is one of those ones that goes from like a purple to a gold to a green. And you can kind of see those shifts there. This next one is another multi-chrome that was sent to me in PR. This is the shade Blood Moon. And this one is really interesting. It's really, really dark.
and it's more satiny and less shimmery. And you can kind of see it's got like a green shimmer on top, which makes this unique compared to a lot of similar multi-chromes I've seen in the past. And then you can see it shifts to a really strong red. I also see it shifting to an orange and almost a gold as well, but I'm not able to capture that. You can see that really strong red shift, at least though. These next two are both depotted from the Where the Wild Things Grow palette. This first shade is Primrose, and then the next one is Sunflower. Primrose is kind of a green leaning black satin shade, and then the shade Sunflower is kind of like a metallic, almost like slate green, I would say. One gripe I have about that palette is that the names that they picked for the shades do not match the flowers of the names at all. Stringtown is similar to Sunflower, but this one is more sea foamy green and has just more kind of color to it, whereas this one is really desaturated. I also find Stringtown to be a little bit more visibly sparkly than most of the other Sydney Grace shades. I would say another one like that in this terms of sparkle is Mielke Way. They just have like a sparkle on top of the shimmer within them. Now we've got one of those $9 multi-chromes that I was talking about before. This is the shade Leapfrog, and I'm not sure if you can see what I mean when I say that it's just a little bit more of a textured shadow, but there's something like really slippy about them. So it's not like if you're familiar with like Shine by SD, where it's like a very dry kind of flaky shadow. This is more of like a slippy kind of shadow. So if you struggle with wear time, know that before purchasing any of the Sydney Grace multi-chromes. That's kind of like more of the formula. This one has a pink sparkle within it. It doesn't really ever shift pink, maybe on like the really extreme edges, but it has like this like silvery to green shift, and then it's got that pink sparkle within it as well, which I'm hoping you can see. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my other arm, and we're starting off with two shades depotted from the Mountain Trail palette. The first one, the deep kind of green, is To Earth. This is one of those more satiny shades, and you can see it's like a very blackened kind of olive green. And then we have Escape. This one is again kind of that more satiny finish, and this one has almost like a sage green base with a gold shift on top. It's a very interesting combination of colors. This next one is Sweetsop, and this is probably one of the most interesting Sydney Grace shimmers I have. This one has almost like a bluish kind of green base to it, and then on top it's got this like golden shimmer, and this one is again one that looks a little bit more sparkly IRL. It's a really pretty one, although I will warn the base color on this does stain on me. This next shade is Commission, and I was totally influenced to buy this by Maggie's Makeup Medley, one of my friends here on YouTube. She really likes this one, and I do too. It's really interesting. It's got a very dark base. You can see it almost looks black, kind of like that blackened green To Earth. But then on top, it's got an olivey gold kind of shimmer, kind of similar to the shimmer in Escape. Really, this shade is kind of like if you took these two shades from the Mountain Trail bundle and combined them and put them in that more shiny formula. The next two are again two that are depotted from the Mountain Trail palette. First up, we have Light My World. This one is like the gold version of Commission. Something about them kind of feels similar to me though. I think I might be crazy, because looking at them on my arm, they don't look similar at all, but I feel like looking at them in the pan, they always look similar to me. The other one is Be the Sunshine. This is a really interesting gold. It's almost like an antique gold, but it also is like a very strong kind of yellow gold. So it's like a yellow antique gold, I guess. It's just a really interesting one. This one is the other $9 multi-chrome that I was talking about, and I think they may have discontinued discontinued this one, and if so, that makes me really, really sad because a lot of brands are coming out with this type of shift right now and charging way more than $9 for it. I think this one is such a good deal. If you're wondering, the shade Skyla from Divina is like the same exact shift as this. I have an Instagram reel of it. Maybe I'll pop it up. This one is an orange that has a gold to green shift on it. And again, that flaky kind of texture. This one and Leapfrog don't really have a ton of base color. You can see on the end of my arm here, this is Leapfrog, and it's got like a soft green. And this one, again, has kind of like a soft orange, but it's not like super opaque. Let me see if I move my arm. Do you see that really bright green that it goes to? It's such a visible shift. I can't believe they were selling this for $9. I really hope they bring it back if it's discontinued. This is Pampered. This is another multi-chrome. This one was sent to me in that PR package. You can see it's a pink to orange and gold. I also have Take Me Away. This is another multi-chrome. And this one, oh, I just got like other colors in that. Let me try to get a better swatch. This one is very similar in the shifts. It's just kind of like the iridescent version of Pampered. And I feel like this one goes a little bit more greeny, whereas this one goes a little bit more orange. But that may just be the difference in base color. I'll swatch them out to compare. Oh shoot, I just swatched these in the wrong order. I am so sorry. So up top, we have Take Me Away, then Pampered. Again, I'll move into the light so that way you can see the difference between those. And here's the different base colors on them. Pie Swap is another one that I got in that PR package. This is more of like that kind of satiny leaning type of formula. This is a soft peachy pink with a little bit of a gold, but it's not like quite as impactful and shiny as some of those others that we've swatched already in their $6.50 formula. Next to that, I've got Hey Bride, which is, of course, from the Kendra Matthews palette, Unveiled. Here it is, swatched out. I decided to go ahead and include all of the Kendra Matthews shades in here, just so that way you could see them all compared out. This shade is Queen Anne's Lace, depotted from the Where the Wild Things Grow palette. And this one I really, really like. I think that this is a dupe for one of the like standard kind of shades in the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. If you want to see me swatch that out and look for dupes, I'll link it below. We'll go ahead and stop here because I want to compare those next two shades together and I'm running out of room on my arms. So here is this first set of all of the shimmers I have from Sydney Grace. Feel free to screenshot. And now let's go ahead and move on to the next round. The two that I wanted to compare, first is the shade Strawberries and Cream. And then we've got the shade Apple Orchard. This one was sent to me in PR. I think that these two are pretty similar. Not exactly the same for sure. Strawberries and Cream is a little bit more like peachy, whereas Apple Orchard is a little bit more brown. But I definitely don't think you would necessarily need both of these ones. This shade is depotted from the Kendra Matthews palette. This is the shade Happily Ever After. It's that golden shade, and you can definitely see it is gold compared to these other two, but same kind of mid-tone type of color. Next up, this one is one of my favorites. This is Hot Stuff. I love this as a one and done shadow. I find that like the brown with the gold sheen on top is such a dimensional combo that really adds a lot of depth and dimension without having to do a lot of work. Here we've got the shade Tie the Knot from the Kendra Matthews palette. This one is interesting. This is like a different type of formula than I've seen from Sydney Grace shadows. This is like almost like a satin shadow, but with a golden sparkle within it. And you can see most of the Sydney Grace shimmers have like a sheen to them, whereas this one very clearly has like a sparkle within it. This is the last shadow depotted from the Mountain Trail shimmer side of the palette. Although this one isn't really a shimmer, this is very satiny, leaning closer to matte than to a sheen. This is the shade Rustic. Next to that, we had a tragedy strike right before I started filming. I freaking broke this one. This is Wondrous Knight, and this is a silver, but then in the base, it's like more of a deep kind of taupey brown. This next one is a cult classic. This is the shade Tiara. This is really similar to Wondrous Knight, but where Wondrous Knight has more of like a brownish base, this one is more of an actual taupey kind of like smoky purple brown base with that same silver sparkle on top. If you're fair like me and Tiara seems like it may be a little intimidating, I would like to introduce Peace, which is Tiara for very fair people, in my humble opinion. It's again got that same base, maybe a little bit brighter than Tiara, but then again, it's got like that silver kind of sparkle on top. This is a sleeper for me from this brand. I really like Peace, and I feel like I don't hear people talk about it enough. And then the last shimmer that I have from Sydney Grace is Heart Dog. This is another one that was done in collaboration with Temptalia. This one's interesting. It's almost like a grayish beige, like a grayish kind of base with a champagne metallic on top. Here are those last shimmers one more time before we move on to the mattes. Moving on to mattes, first we have this very, very light cream, kind of pinky leaning shade. This is Kenai Kisses from the Unveiled palette. Next to that, we've got another shade from the Unveiled palette. This is Happy Wedding Day. This is a very, very light pink, and there's almost something a little like beigey to it. This kind of is like a ballet slippers kind of color to me. These next two shades I was influenced to buy from Riley's video on Sydney Grace. I will link that below. This first one is the shade Haven. This is a really pretty like pink leaning kind of lilac shade. And then we have Regal, which is really a just true lavender, like a cool lavender. Moving on to blues, we have the shade Nightfall and Indiana Love. And I am really impressed with these blue mattes. They are very pigmented and very consistently pigmented. They're not patchy at all. This really deep green is the shade Trailhead from the Mountain Trail bundle. This is a very deep, smoky, almost black green. Next, we have Turtle Bay. This one is a blue kind of based green, and I would say it's almost leaning like Kelly green. I would say this next shade is a true Kelly green. This is the shade Evergreen, and you can see it's just a little bit more punchy than Turtle Bay. This next one is called Desert Spoon, and this is a really interesting green. I got this one as a gift with purchase too, and this one, it's almost like the most true green I've ever seen. This one is Honeydew, and again, this is like a true kind of sea foam green to me. This one I wasn't expecting to like quite as much as I have when I picked it up. I got it because it was on sale, but I really, really like that one. We've got two really, really light mattes next. First up is Seafoam, and it's exactly what you're expecting it to be with a name like that. Although I would say this maybe is a little bit more bloom than I would consider to be a Seafoam. And then next we have Sea Breeze, which I was hoping was going to be my perfect pastel green. Although I think that this one is like a little too white based for me. It's a good transition for someone as fair as me, but I don't think if you're any deeper, this one will be a great pickup for you. We'll go ahead and do these last two greens on this arm. So first up, this is the shade Bravo. It's a very kind of army khaki green color, maybe leaning a little bit more khaki. And then we've got the shade Wildlife. This is depotted from the Mountain Trail palette, and this one is probably a little bit more army, less khaki. But again, these two pretty close. Moving on to this arm, we're going to start with another shade depotted from the Mountain Trail palette. This is the shade Backwoods. It's a very deep green-based mustard yellow. Now we've got Lemon Cream. This is a kind of pastel yellow shade. This one, again, very, very white-based and a little bit too white-based for me and my pastel preference, but a good transition color for fair-skinned folks. This shade is Geese Elaine, and this is like the truest yellow that Sydney Grace offers. It's a little less like saturated, I guess, than what I would consider to be like the truest of yellows, but it is very bright for Sydney Grace especially. Then we've got the shade Dirt Road depotted from the Mountain Trail palette. This one is kind of a classic kind of mustard yellow. Buttercup is from the Where the Wild Things Grow palette, and this is a burnt orange. Then we've got Voila, which I got as a free gift with purchase with one of my orders. And this one is a little bit more brownish and red, but I would still say it falls kind of within an orange category. Blazing Star is another one from Where the Wildflowers Go. This is a warm-toned brown, leaning orange for sure. Then we've got Touch Football. This one I got as a part of my PR package. This one, a pretty true mid-tone, leaning deep brown. Not too warm, not too cool. And you can see that in comparison to the next shade, Relax. This one definitely is more cool, but kind of basically the same depth on those two shades. This one is the shade Camel. This is a single shadow that I purchased, but it is very, very similar to the shade Poppy. This is depotted from the Where the Wild Things Grow palette, and you can see it's a little bit peachier, but pretty close. I will say one thing about Sydney Grace is they really cater to a wide variety of undertones. So if you're someone that is like, oh, I really want a mid-tone brown, but I want it to be cool, they can get you like down to the very specific undertone that you're looking for. But on the flip side, that also can make it kind of hard to figure out which one may be the best for you. They do have pretty good descriptions on the website, but I'm hoping that's why things like swatches can be helpful to figure out which one may be the best for you. Because like, you definitely don't need both of these. You definitely don't need both of these, you know. Here we've got Iced Mocha. This is, again, kind of a light brown, but a little bit pinkier than the other two that we've looked at and a little bit deeper. Now we've got those two that I said I think are a little too similar from the Unveiled palette. First up, we have Forever and Always. This one's a little bit deeper, but pretty close to Iced Mocha. Again, a little deeper, but like you kind of have to build it up to see that difference. And then we've got First to Dance. This one's a little lighter, but again, should they both have been in the palette? In my opinion, no, but who am I, you know? I'm gonna go ahead and try to fit two more on this arm. So first up, we've got Pumpkin Patch. This one was gifted to me in PR. And then we've got the shade Laughter. This one's a little bit pinkier, but really all of these that I've just swatched are pretty similar. You definitely do not need all of these. I think like they would fulfill the same purpose on the eye for the most part. Here are all of those matte shadows one last time all together. Now let's go ahead and finish off with the last set. We've got a lot of pinky kind of blush, peach, coral kind of shades that all are pretty similar. First up, we've got the shade Dandelion. This one is depotted from Where the Wild Things Grow. Next up, we have Blushing Bride. This one is from the Unveiled palette. You can see a little bit bolder, a little bit warmer, but pretty close. And then we've got the shade Time to Celebrate. This one was sent to me in PR. It's a little bit deeper, a little bit more true pink, but again, pretty close. Honeymoon Phase comes from the Unveiled palette. This is pretty close to Time to Celebrate, maybe a little bit more purpley, less pinky, but again, they're similar for sure. Sorry, my arm is still a little tiny bit wet from washing them off with the last set of swatches, so that's why that swatch looks a little bad. Next, we've got October Odyssey Light. This one is from Temptalia's collab. Again, going a little bit more purple, but these all kind of look similar to me. It's hard for me to describe the nuances. I'm not great at that. This shade is from the Unveiled palette. This is the shade Maid of Honor. It's kind of like a deep burgundy kind of shade. Again, my arm a little wet. I actually just wiped this off and like redid this because I called this the wrong name. And I confused it with this one, which is Pucker Up. They are very, very similar. Pucker Up is maybe a little bit more browny than Maid of Honor, but these two are swatching really bad. I think it's because my arm is probably still a touch wet. This one, I cannot remember for the life of me if I got it in that little PR package or if I got it as a gift with purchase, but I'll denote it correctly down below. This really deep brown is the shade Bee Balm from the Where the Wild Flowers or Where the Wild Things Grow palette. Very, very deep chocolatey brown, a little bit cooler. This one is Bombshell Bride. This is the deepest brown within the Unveiled palette. And you can see it's a little warmer, a little less deep than Bee Balm. But, you know, again, they fulfill the same purpose. We've got Unity and I Do, both from the Unveiled palette. Unity is a nice mid-tone cool brown. And then we've got I Do, which is a light, cool tone grayish kind of color. Definitely leaning more grayish than like actually brown. I can't believe we are finally nearing the end. This first one is Moon Landing. I originally thought that this was like a really cool gray kind of shade, but seeing it compared to I Do, it actually looks quite a bit more brown. And then Moon Landing is a very interesting matte. This is like a grayish green kind of color. I really like this one. I have not seen anything else quite like it. I find it so unique and flattering for me since I'm a neutral, cool, but sometimes olivey looking kind of undertone. The last two, we freaking did it, you guys. First up, we've got a very cool blue leaning gray. This is the shade Success. Oh, so nice. And then lastly, from the Unveiled palette, we've got a black. This is the shade Not a Bridezilla. And here is the last of all of the mattes swatched out together. A few last notes about Sydney Grace overall. So we've kind of talked about pricing throughout. I realized I got the prices a little bit off earlier. So the shimmer shadows that like I think of as being like metallic, shiny shimmers, those are actually called pressed pigment shadows on the Sydney Grace website, and those sell for $6.25 a piece. Then those more satiny kind of shades they call shimmer shadows. Those are $5.25 a piece. Earlier I was saying that they were $6.50 and $5.50, but they're 25-cent increments. And then the matte shadows are also all $5.25 as well. Something to note, some of the singles from these different palettes are sold individually. So if you saw any of the shades from these palettes that stuck out to you, be sure to check and see if they sell them individually. So that way you're not like buying a full palette for like one or two shades that you may like. Shipping from Sydney Grace is probably the least expensive shipping I've ever had from an indie brand. If I remember correctly, it was somewhere around $4, which is great. They also ship in a very small package, which I personally like. One, it fits in my mailbox, so it gets left there, which is convenient for the USPS, but then also it's more eco-friendly to have those smaller packages and not have a ton of excess materials within them. They also are always include like a random sticker, you know, that's themed around whatever season it is with their branding on it. So I think that's really cute. And they ship very quickly in my experience. Of course, during their Christmas and July sale, it takes a little bit longer for them to ship, but overall, they are very, very efficient with shipping. I think Sydney Grace is a really good brand. They are very professional and they're very transparent. They always make sure to like restock things and like let people know when things are restocking. And if there was a sale going on and something sold out, they're really good about putting that item back up for sale when it's restocked. So that way, those who didn't get a chance to purchase it at the sale price are still able to get it at a discount. I do want to note that when I received my PR, I had someone reach out to me on Instagram and let me know about a post that said that Sydney Grace was anti-choice. So I have some feelings about this. If you've seen my video on like reasons why I don't support a brand, I don't support brands who don't align with me and like my own views, purely because I don't want to give my money to a brand who I'm afraid may use my dollars in a way that I don't align with. The message, though, that is meant to imply that Sydney Grace is anti-choice, I feel like is being taken a little bit extreme. I feel conflicted about this because I work for a large organization, and in my role, I respond to emails like general inquiries from people across the globe. And so if someone asked me like what my organization's stance on a political matter was, I definitely would not feel comfortable answering that question on behalf of my whole organization. And it's totally not up to like me as an individual whether or not my organization makes statements on things even in the first place. So I can understand why the employee sent what they sent in response to the DM. I know for a fact from my work with Sydney Grace and like the PR that they've sent me that they have employees that work across the United States remotely doing their customer service work. So again, it doesn't really surprise me that a specific employee wouldn't feel comfortable giving like a brand statement on a topic that is so controversial. On the flip side, I do wish that they would have come out with a statement clearly in support of women's health. But if you watched that video where I talked about reasons why I wouldn't support a brand, I also said like the best thing a brand can do is keep to themselves. Like, I don't care if a brand is political, but if they're political in a way that I don't align with, it makes me less likely to support. So I totally respect their choice to like stay out of politics and just be a makeup brand. But I wish that they would come out in a little bit more clear support of women's rights and women's health. I just wanted to be sure to address that a little bit just in case you've seen that post and you know that I typically comment on brands when they're doing right and doing wrong. I think overall Sydney Grace does a lot right, and I think that choosing not to comment on politics is totally a brand's prerogative. With that out of the way though, it is time to talk about the giveaway. So I'm so grateful that Sydney Grace gave me a palette to give to one of you. It's super kind of them. I am going to, after trial and erroring some giveaways in the past, I've decided the easiest way to do this is to have people comment on this post and then fill out a Google form, link in the description. And in the Google form, it's very simple. Just your name, your username on YouTube, and your email address, so that way I can contact you if you win. This giveaway is going to close at the end of February, and since it's a leap year, that means it will close on February 29th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So be sure to check it out. Sign up for the giveaway. I am really excited to send the palette to someone. And once the giveaway is closed, I'll update the description and let you all know who won. I typically do the drawings live on my Instagram. So if you aren't following me on there, be sure to go check me out and look at the description again for like written out instructions for how to sign up for the giveaway. All right, I can tell this has been a long video. Secretly, I've been filming this over a long period of time. It's been a journey, you guys, but I'm really excited to be at the end. Thank you so much for watching this far. If you've gotten this far, I really, really appreciate you. And until I see you next time, I hope that you stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye!